Hello together. Welcome to our next episode of the vCF Musketeers. Today we're going to talk about sizing. So as you can see, normally also Eve should be there, but he's stuck a little bit in traffic. He will join us later. And also I hopefully expect that Alain will join us. Also, he is just joining. Let me add him already to the stage.
Mhm.
Hello, how are you?
Hi everyone.
So, today we are talking about domain sizing. So, let's start with the Excel, and then afterwards we will figure out why Alain is on stage. But let's start originating with the Excel file. So, I will share my screen, and then we will have a look in the Excel where we stopped last time. So today we are talking about management domain sizing, what's the idea behind, and how it's going. So first of all, as you can see, we are talking about management domain sizing inputs only. So we are not talking about workload domain currently. That's the reason why I have Alain with me. But let's start with the management domain. So what can we or what should we design from a management perspective? Virtual machine overhead percentage. So what are we assuming that our virtual machines maybe consume more memory? So for example, if I know, hey, my environment is really something which is highly dynamically, I will ramp up often new networks, delete the networks. Maybe I have some Kubernetes stuff in there. Then maybe I have more workload or more CPU or memory usage on my backend systems. So that's the reason why we can here come in with the virtual machine overhead and also with an estimated grow percentage. So especially when it comes, and this is also one of the reasons why I have Alain with me today, when it comes to growing, for example, of log engines, for example, area operations for log, but also operations manager. In general, I would also take in the accountability here what amount of log files and what's the log retention I would like to provide in my vCF environment comes into there when we are talking about grow percentage. The next thing is the definition of my management host. So how many cores does my management host have? How many RAM does my management host have? Would I like to go with any kind of oversubscription? So say, hey, it is fine to have 1 to 5 or 1 to 2 as an oversubscription, or do we clearly say here, no, my management domain will not utilize any kind of oversubscription, regardless if it is memory or if it is CPU. And to be honest, from my point of view and what we have seen also in the past, it is clearly a good idea to not overcommit your management domain, especially when it comes to any kind of cloud management portal, for example, VCD in front, where we have maybe a dynamically need of resources, provisioning, as mentioned already, new networks provisioning, new virtual machines. So all of my vCenters run in my management domain. So I'm not a big fan of having my management domain here any kind of oversubscribed. And as we have discussed last time, when we go with vSAN originating storage architecture, so with OSA, we can also define the amount of disk groups we would like to utilize or we would like to have here in our management domain. For the management domain itself, we can define what size of the vCenter we are going to utilize. Also here, this value heavily depends what you would like to achieve with your management domain. If you really ramp up a single management domain only for management components and for the area stuff, a small sized vCenter is absolutely fine. If you start with vCF and saying, "Hey, I'm not starting with a dedicated management domain and already a dedicated workload domain. I would like to have a collapsed environment, then it is a good idea at least to go with a medium or have a large vCenter. But as always, please have a look into the configuration maximum. So for example, a small vCenter has a config max of how many hosts, or, and this is the most important part, it is always an and or decision. How many hosts or virtual machines can I have in a single vCenter? Storage perspective, also here, this is when it comes to LR as well. It depends of log rotation and log retention. How many log files would I like to store on my vCenter and for how long? Or do I clearly say, hey, I don't care about log files on my vCenter. I have my other operations for log there, and I will do immediately log forwarding, so I don't take care about my vCenter. NSX in the workload in the management domain is always dedicated, so I cannot change it. What I can change is the size of my manager. Please do not change it to small or extra small because it is not supported. We go with a medium, and also for the NSXT edges, we go for medium size. And if we have any kind of federation planned, we can also define here the NSXT global manager. And then the same is there for my workload domains. So I start with workload domain number 1 and can go up to workload domain 24. So for those who are saying, hey, but I know there is only maximum of 16 workload domains in linked mode. That's right. That's the idea behind is there to select here, to go here with an isolated workload domain. And as soon as you go with an isolated workload domain, you will not utilize here any kind of shared SSO. You will really have a fully isolated workload domain with a dedicated NSX manager, with a dedicated SSO instance. And that's it that's the reason why we now can already grow up to 24 workload domains in total in a vCF environment. So as you can see, there are also some general guidelines and vSphere and NSX T sizing in there. We have already discussed this. One last thing I would like to point out, if we go with NSX Federation, then we need also to enable federation here. So let me quickly ramp up a new workload domain. I go with a workload domain, and I would like to have it here federated. Then I can define if it is an active global manager, a standby global manager, or just a connect instance. What's the difference between here? In federation, we always have one active global manager, one standby global manager, and then some connect instances. So connect instances only means, hey, this is an instance which is connected to my global manager, but is not carrying any standby or active roles there. So if, for example, let's do a quick example. I have 4 data center sites. 2 of them are my main sites. Let's call it that way. So in one side, I have my active global federation manager. In the other main side, I have my standby global manager, and the other 2 data center sites are just connected to there. That's the idea behind active standby and connected instances. And as soon as you select the connect instance, you see here, you don't need to define any kind of size. When we go, for example, with an active one, I need to define what size of my global manager I would like to utilize. Also from the global manager perspective, medium or large is a proper solution. But as mentioned before, please have a look into configuration maximums. Otherwise, you maybe run into an issue. Also from site protection, disaster recovery, which will come up in one of the next episodes, we can exclude if we would like to provide site protection and disaster recovery to a workload domain, or if you say no, there is no site protection needed. So what does site protection disaster recovery means? Are we going to have here any kind of stretched vSAN environment or stretched cluster environment? So that's the idea behind site protection and disaster recovery. But and that's the part where I reached out to Eller and say, hey Eller, I have a problem because the configuration spreadsheet is quite nice and is quite fine, but
Mhm.
what we are really missing or what we are really lacking here in the spreadsheet is the amount or the possibility to bring in any kind of useful information for my workload domain. So as you can see, if I quickly go to the chapters here, we have the management domain sizing, we have LCM stuff, we have certification for the workload domain, we have the workload domain itself with
Mhm.
IP addresses, we have identity and access management, we have developer ready infrastructure, so talking about Tanzu, we have log analytics. So this is also a chapter where I would like to reach out to LR in the future. But there is not really any kind of spreadsheet available saying, hey, but what's the sizing of my workload domain? So as soon as it comes to the sizing of a workload domain, my to be honest, my answer would always be it depends, because we need to figure out an performance profile of my virtual machines. And this is something which can be from time to time a little bit tough, to be honest, and a little bit tricky. Or you have a crazy Belgium guy in your pocket who can support you on that. And that's one of the chapter or one of the topics I would like to discuss today. How can maybe, or is there maybe a proper solution which can support me already upfront at the beginning of the sizing of my workload domain, and also on the other hand, um, especially with the now new license model, is there any kind of possibility to say, hey, I would like to have already upfront some input parameters, what's the amount of cores I assume to utilize in the future based on my current environment. Maybe a little bit independent of if it is already virtualized or not. But to be honest, in the year 2024, I mostly care about virtualized environments. And that's the reason
Yeah.
why I brought Alert with me. So Alert, maybe for those who don't know you right now, because you have been already in the VCD roundtable, but maybe we have some new audience in the vCF Musketeers as well. So maybe you do a quick introduction of yourself.
All right. A quick introduction of the crazy Belgian. So I pulled up my page from our website where you can find more information and blog posts I wrote and so on. My name is Alain Geenrits. If I have a French first name and a Dutch last name, that I must be Belgian. I used to work. I used to work a long time ago for VMware, somewhere from 2012 to 2016, and I was already a cloud pre-sales guy, so I immediately fell in love with operations, vCops in those days, and helped customers with that. Afterwards, I went to Blue Medora, a name which people might still remember because I bombarded them with demos of management packs. It was a technology partner of VMware. We made those beautiful management packs that allowed you to also manage your Dell hosts or Pure Storage or whatever from operations. And then, of course, I joined the ComDivision gang, whom I already knew since my first week at VMware because Eve gave me my original operations training in 2012 with Matthias in the room. So we go way back. And I still do most of the operations for log, let's say all the ARIA stuff. It's what I still find fun and still help customers with more and more now that we have chargeback integrated, but we discussed that in the VCD roundtable. And of
Mhm.
course, when Tobias and I started talking about this, I said, like, well, with your beautiful spreadsheet, people will say, like, oh, I have to fill out the spreadsheet now, or I will print it out and take some crayons and start filling in values. Try to consult vCenter and look at some values and try to determine where it is going, and then do a sizing, which we would call wet finger sizing, which is probably not what we want for a nice vCF environment. We were talking about this, and I hope that a lot of the customers, a lot of you considering the move to vCF, have, as Toby said, already a traditional virtualized environment, and you are perhaps already running operations. And if you're not running it, well, maybe you can hurry and install it. I think it's still available now in a trial version. So that it analyzes your environment. Why do I say this? And this is very important. This comes back time after time. I show operations to people, and then everybody goes like, yeah, okay, but I have vCenter. I look in vCenter for that, and I go like, no, vCenter tells you a state now, and vCenter will give you an, how to say, a momentary overview.
Yeah.
But vCenter has no memory. vCenter is like your grandfather. He has a good short. Well, no, your grandfather has a bad short-term memory and a good long-term, but the reverse then, whatever. But vCenter doesn't recall what happened in the past. vCenter cannot recognize patterns, and operations just does exactly that. Just quickly, for those who don't know, operations is still around in vCF, so it pays to start using this tool now, because it is the basic of everything operations in vCF. It reads all the data from your complete environment, okay? From vCenter, from everything attached. If you have management packs to bring data in, fine. It reads data from VCD, and it brings everything in a database, and you determine how many weeks, months are kept in the database to look back. And very important, it runs constantly an analysis of your performance, but also your capacity. So I chose this dashboard as my background because I hope if you already run operations, or if you're going to run it, that this is your favorite dashboard. It comes back in the operations guide. It's the live heavy hitters. And if you install operations, let's be clear, it has to run a few days to get basic data in, to get a complete picture. You might need a month. It depends on how active your environment is. But this is a dashboard that all the operation people love. And I would suggest you look at this before you start doing your planning, because it gives you a nice little view of how your environment is running. For disk IOPS, disk throughput, network throughput, CPU demand, I clicked here on the red one, and then you see at the bottom what is happening. Why do I say this? Well, you can do a sizing, a configuration of your environment, but if you do not know if your environment is running smoothly, that doesn't make sense. So I would suggest you have a look at this.
Which brings us to the important. I cannot speak today. To the important part. If, to be honest, if you have already, let's call it, a not so nice running environment, and you ramp up a vCF environment, you will transfer the same problems, but then maybe blame it on a new cold product. But as we have already discussed multiple times, at the end, vCF is just a framework in front of vSphere, in front of NSX, in front of ARIA, bringing in a perfect solution. But vCF itself is not capable of solving your current issues. So if you have already issues in your current environment, then you maybe will transfer the issues also to your new, then fully automated deployment by VMware Cloud Foundation. But the issue is still there.
Exactly. and vCF forces you into the architecture, like you said, which a lot of people, let's be honest, were already trying. Customers that we saw that keep everything on a management cluster, that is operations for log, vCenter, and so on, and then workload clusters on the other side. And in vCF, we take this idea further. We have the management domain, and you have the workload domain. So have a look at that. And then, of course, if operations is running here, then it becomes interesting. And let me show that to you. Let me go to a live view, which is always fun and dangerous. I hope you can still see that.
Yeah.
So this is my operations dashboard. To make this live with a lot of data, I logged into the operations of the colleagues at Broadcom. Do not tell them. But if you want to see a few problems, hey. And you can go to a dashboard such as cluster capacity. Why? Because it will tell you instantly a lot of the things Toby was already talking about. Like you see here in the analysis, okay, I have 4 clusters in this environment. One is red. Why is it red? You see here that it has 0 days left. Again, Toby just told you, if your environment is not running fine, no magic will happen. If you transfer this cluster, which is already out of resources, it will not magically gain resources. You have to do something.
But why? I'm now running on vCF. It should be solved.
Magic is a separate option you have to enable. It also tracks for you the KPI. A lot of people forget that operations will track KPIs, so that may be interesting. I'm not going into how exactly it does that at the moment, but it will for, let's take another cluster. It will tell you for like this cluster, for example, that it has more than a year in resources. It has a third of its capacity left, and you can quickly see like, hey, what's my CPU workload, what finger method memory workload. But, and Toby just told you not to do it, but I'll show it anyway. It will show you for that cluster what is your current overcommit ratio.
It is fine on the workload domain, but don't on the management domain. Don't do it on
Okay,
the
we
management
agree. We agree completely. Although we must, yeah.
Let's dig on that on that for a second, because that's really an interesting part you're now ramping up, and also where I clearly would say this is maybe interesting, or this from my point of view is highly interesting for many customers now with the new license model. So if you figure out you have an, let's call it underworked cluster, or a cluster which is, to be honest, provisioned well, but maybe has too much free resources, because as you mentioned, you can clearly see in Operations Manager, how long will it take with my current ratio of growing, with my current amount of virtual machines, until I really run into issues. And if we figure out there is something telling me, hey, more than 1 year, because I think more than 1 year is the maximum he's telling you.
Yep.
Then maybe you should have a better look into that cluster and say, hey, okay, maybe I put out there some resources to save on licenses.
Exactly. That's very important, and you see this because in this cluster, as you said, my overcommit ratio is very low. Okay, I know we also show memory, but it's not so interesting for our licensing, which we just mentioned. And I still have to find the first customer that wants to overcommit in memory without killing me. So the overcommit ratio is very low, and you see here in reclaimable that at the moment there's nothing to be reclaimed, so we need to really adjust this. You see also, as Toby said, in the CPU workload, here in I call this turquoise, I don't know how you call it, light blue, let's say, the usage, and the usage is at the moment 23%, and you have 65 available. So clearly this is underused also in memory. It even tells you which model it is, the hosts in that cluster. So for your host planning, the hosts, they all have like half of their resources remaining, more than a year to go. And then you can say like, okay, but what are the VMs in here for my workload domain? Um, um, how much CPU and memory do they have left? And then if needed, you can go further down and you can go, if you're looking for these dashboards and you install operations, all of these are under capacity, obviously. You can go to VM capacity, for example, and it will tell you for all the virtual machines. Well, there's one running out of time again. It will tell you for all of them how they are configured, what the capacity remaining is. So you can clearly see how you want to configure them, even the disk. Yes, we do recognize your operating system. So I clicked on a Linux one. So it has obviously a root partition and a host partition. If I have it's an Ubuntu Linux, you see that it gets all that from the tools. So you can look at all your virtual machines and look at the individual parameters. If you really want to dive into it, I'll take the same one because it only has 25 days left. If I click on the details for that virtual machine, I can really go to the summary, like, okay, it's an Ubuntu Linux. The capacity remaining is 25 days. I have 20% left. You can look at all the parameters here, but you can click on the data here and then see, okay, CPU, total used, what is the recommended size, and look at what right sizing you need to do for that virtual machine.
Which brings us to the next question I have in mind. Do I have the capability also doing a right sizing of my virtual machine? And you have it already answered. So also that is something which is important from not only from a licensing perspective, I would say. I would clearly say also for my whole data center, do not waste resources on one hand, do not overcommit them, because this absolutely impacts your vCF workload domains as well. So as mentioned before, at the end, vCF is a framework to provide us the capability of ramping up easily new clusters, easily a whole new workload domain. But at the end, it is backed by vSphere. So if I do anything wrong, like overcommitting or have a heavy load on my virtual machines or have misconfigured them with the amount of memory, with the amount of CPU, I will run into the same issue. So also there, vCF cannot or will not solve any problems. So right sizing is something which is absolutely and needed and mandatory also in a vCF environment.
Yep, and you can do it straight from operations, but you see here in my right sizing dashboard, interesting for what you mentioned for licensing, I have 380 CPUs too much, oversized, and I have only 6 vCPUs in undersized VMs, clearly something wrong. I'm here on all the VMs, and you can just look at the list. These are the undersized VMs. Why are they undersized? This one, for example, quickly, the CPUs is fine, 0 to add, 6 CPUs configured, but you need to add a gig of memory because it has 24 gigs, and it sees that that is not enough.
Yeah, but from a Broadcom point of view, 360 something CPUs oversized, absolutely fine. Everything is right.
Yes, Mr. Tan will be very pleased with that. But yeah, maybe not your financial people.
Yeah.
And here you see in the oversized VMs, and this. I'm gonna give my tip right away now, because you see here in the oversized VM, there is one, of course, called SSC demo. This is by design, where you can remove 8 CPUs of the 16 that are configured, and you can remove 16 gigabytes of the 32 gig memory configured. Now, I know what you're going to say. People always tell to me like, well, that's fine if you demo this, it's fine for you to say, but I have my internal customers, and when I tell them this, they start screaming at me and nothing happens. Well, my golden rule is the rule of 50%. So what I say to customers here is, fine, operations tells you to remove 8 CPUs, remove 4. It tells you to remove 16 gigs, remove 8. It's the golden middle way.
It's the golden middle, yeah.
Yeah, because you end up with still more resources than you need according to operations, and you still save something. And then if you resize it, and after a month you can have another look at it, and maybe you can further reduce it. This is a continuous action. We all know that these operations are something that you have to discipline to do every day. Look at your graphics, and every day you have to reiterate in your environment how it is running until AI takes it all over and does it automatically for you.
I think you mentioned it already. So one of my biggest first contact with also in the times back when it still was called vCenter operations was I installed it, and immediately after I installed it, I figured out, I clearly said, hey, what is this for a shitty product? Because I don't see anything. You mentioned it already before, especially when it came to an assessment to come out to really have a good output for sizing of a workload domain. I would say at least it should run 30 days or a little bit more, maybe
30 days.
30 days.
It's
Maybe,
even it's a bit better now. Depending on the environments, you can already see some things after 1 or 2 weeks.
yeah.
Depends the environment. Yeah.
But what still I think, please correct me, Ella, if I'm wrong. What's still a good idea is it to have it between 2 months, so that we don't say, okay, I will just let it run in May, for example. Maybe I say, hey, let's start by mid of May and let it run until mid of June. That I also have a cut over from in there, maybe related to monthly backup stuff and or any kind of end of month task which are running in my data center, to clearly get here also the insights as well.
Yeah, and then we cannot all explain it because it would take us too far. But one thing that people forget is that in operations there are policies, and policies are like little configuration files which are needed. It used to be that we didn't have that. The problem is that you probably have production environment and test environment, and also in your vCF environment, you're going to make the distinction perhaps. And you want different settings for capacity calculation and right sizing depending on your environment. So you see here that there is a default policy active. You see that there are a number of them. So if it's running for a while, well, my colleagues have been putting a lot in here. Let's take the default policy. You see capacity. There have been some changes. So, for example, here somebody put in that the normal overcommit ratio is 4:1 for CPU, 1:1 for memory, and 2:1 for disk space. All of this you can change in the policy, so you need to change this, and we can help you with that. So in capacity, you can even, because you just mentioned something like that, Toby, you can even say like, okay, but I'm only interested in capacity calculations for my business hours, or stuff like that. Or I want to have some buffers. If you're in a production environment, you want definitively that operations tells you, well, you've reached 100%, 0 days left, like we saw before, but in reality, you still have a buffer of 10%.
Okay.
You can find that here. Yeah.
Which also brings us to at the output. I get a clearer configuration or a better sizing output to really say, hey, okay, I now need to ramp up a new workload domain in my vCF with that amount of memory, that amount of CPU, and that amount of whatever kind of storage. Must not always be vSAN, as we know, but to go with vSAN or go not with vSAN, because, and this is also the beauty of Operations Manager, I also get the insights of storage requirements. So I see what amount of IOs are produced by my virtual machines. So I can also have a look into my IO phase of a virtual machine. One last question came to my mind, and you covered it already a little bit in the beginning. Yes, to be honest, it's absolutely fair to assume that mostly of the customer are already running virtualized. Is there any kind of capability or possibility to utilize Operations Manager also for bare metal systems?
Yes, yes, and no. What you need to do if you have bare metal systems. So the infamous management packs I talked about, they also exist for things like bare metal Dell servers, HP servers, and so on. Unfortunately, apart from Cisco UCS, most have not built in themselves the capacity calculations.
Mm-hmm.
But what you can do and what you should do, but then you need, unfortunately, the enterprise version of operations. But that's fine if you only run a trial. I have not said this, but there I said it. Is to use the telegraph agents. With the telegraph agents, what you're going to do is install an agent in the operating system, also on your bare metal server. This is supported. Do not let anyone tell you anything else. And then that can report from inside the bare metal server what resources are used, and you can make an estimation of what is needed. The advantage of the telegraph agents is that VMware decided a few years ago to not use their own agents anymore. At the moment, I can't even remember what they used to be called, but anyway, they started using Telegraph, which is an open source. So you can also use the open source versions of Telegraph that do not come from VMware for
Mm-hmm.
capacity. Yeah.
To get information basically out of my operating system, and I would say in 90% of the phases this is more than sufficient. Yeah, there will be maybe some environments where you really need to have a look into directly onto the hardware, as you mentioned, like Dell servers and HP servers. But I would say with the Telegraph agent, you mostly cover all of the necessary informations to size your to size your workload domain.
And another little tip that I will give, I'm talking to the guys. It's not in here yet, but if you want a quick way to come to all those dashboards and everything we showed you, that if you install operations, you go to home and capacity, and it's all here, the capacity dashboards, the right sizing, and so on. But you also have the planning here. Now, there is no what if scenario here to move an environment to vCF. It would be nice. Maybe we can work on that. But what you can do is for infrastructure planning, you can say, Toby mentioned a few times, you want a new workload domain, you want to have a little overhead and so on. You can do some modeling here. What will happen if I add hosts or remove hosts? Okay, something wrong. Or even in hyperconverged, if I add nodes or remove nodes, and you can even say like, well, you could do a migration planning to VMware Cloud that might give you an idea of what is happening. But yeah, workload planning, you can also add VMs and remove VMs. And for some reason, I can't do this at the moment.
Which is not a big deal because
okay.
it is there. And I would assume that maybe the VMware Cloud will be extended with vCF in the near future.
Yeah, because I can show you here. It's the same for the others. So of course I have to select the region here, but that's for pricing. So let's say that we use the Azure version to say something else. So take Western Europe, and then you can do some cluster settings like, hey, CPU headroom, and you can configure your applications, or you can import them from existing VMs, or from a profile that you already created.
Which brings me already some interesting outcome. Also, to be honest, because if I can select VMC or if I can select Azure VMware Solution or OCI or GCV, whatever, I can also utilize this currently already to size my vCF environment, because at the end we know that there is something in the same manner running in the background.
Yeah, there you go.
Hello.
Yes.
Anything else you would like to add?
No, I think we covered a lot. We covered the capacity, the right sizing, the fact that you have to optimize a bit. Of course, I want to say to people that we are here to help them. If they want to install operations to do an analysis and they have no idea how operations work, hey, maybe you can work with us.
Yeah.
And it's a quick install. It's half a day to explain to you how it works, and then after a while we come back to have a look at the results.
And I mean, I came in late.
Hey, easy.
No, but I think
but I know that the boss was watching.
Yeah. That what everybody keeps forgetting is those who switch to vCF licenses, you have enterprise licenses now for everything.
Yes,
that gives you full functionality. So there are potentially a lot of customers who have already made the switch or transitioned to the subscription license who might not be aware that they already have enterprise edition of VROps. So I think it's really important not only to look at it from a, hey, can I test or play with it? It's actually going to be more or less the standard, at least for a good part of the customers in the future. So getting to know all these products around vCF is going to be important, because it's a bit like with the Office suite, you are getting a lot of products now, which you basically have included, and it would be stupid to not use them, especially things like right sizing and all these wonderful things, because they, in the end, before you actually invest in more hardware, it might be make more sense to actually make sure that your infrastructure is running optimal.
Absolutely, and I would also say, maybe not too loud, but we can right now, since we are talking about are the operations 8.6 is the current version.
I'm sorry, 8.17.1.
8.17. Yeah, okay, 8.17. Whatever. I don't care about, to be honest, build numbers and VMware. I don't care anymore about it. But to be honest, at the moment there is no new install routine, so still the deployment, the standalone deployment is still possible. So why not utilize it already? That's what I would like really to add here. As long as we don't have any kind of new install or setup routine, that maybe in the future, but to be honest, this is something which is not defined yet or hasn't been spoken out loud. So this is just an assumption. Maybe in the future, okay, it will only be possible to install ARIA operations, for example, only within a vCF stack. But currently, talking as it is today, I still have the possibility to deploy the standalone product, bring in the license file or the license key, and utilize it. So for those who have already switched to subscription license, not a big deal. You can utilize this. And to be honest, we will not cover it, but I would also say for those customers who have switched or who are switching to vSphere Foundation, they also have ARIA operations there. So ARIA is now really a deep integrated part into the whole vSphere stack, and brings us really the possibility to do a right sizing And as you have seen in the Excel spreadsheet, it is there for the workload, for the management domain, but not for the workload domain. And the workload domain is always the more work to do, because the management domain is clearly defined. I have my NSX managers, I have my vCenters, I have my SDDC manager, I have my ARIA suite, whatever I would like to add, not a big deal. But as soon as it comes to the definition of the design of the workload domain, there is nothing in the spreadsheet, because it is, as we have seen right now, we are talking slightly, rough 30 minutes of the possibilities you have to get really the amount of data out of your environment to do a right sizing. So this is nothing you can clearly say, hey, I will do it straightforward. No, not possible. Good. Then, thank you very much for your time.
You're very welcome, as always.
And for the next time, we will have a look into the whole networking inputs, IP address inputs, Active Directory inputs, what's needed there, what's mandatory there. So I would say let's close it for today and see you in the next episode.
See you later. Bye-bye.
See you. Bye.